Absolute beginner's guide to getting started with digital art. This is a question that comes in an awful lot. All right, let's do it. I'm not gonna waste any time. The first thing that you're gonna wanna do if you're gonna learn to do digital art is you're gonna need some kind of a computer and you're gonna need some kind of a pen input device. I do not recommend you learn how to draw digital art using a mouse, although some people will argue with me. The first thing that I would recommend is take a look around at what your resources are. If you have yourself an iPad, for instance, and if it's an iPad Pro, then hey, that's not a bad way to go. Get yourself an Apple Pen, you got yourself a completely portable sketchbook device. If you get a program such as Procreate, it's very affordable. Now there are many apps that you could try out that are cheap or free in the iPad, but I just highly recommend Procreate or Sketchbook Pro. But the reason why this is my #1 recommendation for absolute beginners just getting started with this is because it's an iPad. So for instance, if it doesn't work out with the drawing thing, you still got yourself a sweet iPad. And if you're really like, yo, I really don't think I want this, then hey, you can always sell that iPad, okay? And you end up getting a little bit of your money back, so it's not like a big, huge expenditure that you're stuck with, whereas like a PC might be harder to sell. It's very compact, so you can take it with you wherever you go, because if you're just getting started with this, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time with it, familiarizing yourself with, just getting good lines down and understanding how to use layers and understanding how to use some of these tools. Now, Procreate is a full painting suite, and honestly, it's a very cost-effective thing because some of the other options, when you get into the Pro range, they're gonna be expensive and they're gonna have subscription models, and you're not gonna want that when you're just getting started. So I highly recommend, for an absolute beginner with a reasonable budget, if you've got the resources, get yourself that iPad Pro, maybe just a medium size, and get yourself that Apple Pencil with Procreate. You got yourself a really great portable studying workstation there. Funny enough, some people are gonna comment, oh, that's so expensive. There's no way I would do that. What are you doing recommending an iPad to beginners? And other people are gonna say, oh yeah, well, iPads are really cheap. And there's no winning. I'm just gonna tell you a few more options in case maybe you don't have access to the funds or access to an iPad, an existing iPad, okay? Speaking of which, let's talk about your second option. I would suggest that you scrounge through your house and look for an old computer. This could be Mac or Windows. Well, how do you know if it's gonna be powerful enough? Head on over to Sketchbook Pro and download their trial. Don't buy a pen or anything just yet. Just make sure you got a computer that'll run this, okay? This is the lowest cost and point of entry. And just see if that Sketchbook Pro app runs. If you can move the cursor around and set up file sizes that are about 2000 by 2000 pixels, draw with a big fat brush across the screen and just watch for things like slowdown, then you're gonna have something that's at least powerful enough for you to draw on. You wanna watch for things like lag. Make sure it's not lagging. The last thing you want is something that's going to be slowing down while you're drawing, and you're gonna be making a lot of mistakes as you're learning how to use layer modes and as you're learning how to draw using a tablet. So if this is a PC, maybe you can upgrade the RAM. You might have to do a little research to get a computer that will actually run something like Sketchbook Pro at a reasonable speed. And hey, if $1,000 ain't a lot to you, then just go buy just go out and buy a computer then, But the point of this part is like to say, hey, if you got something that already kind of works to get you started, just the most important thing here is don't rack up a huge debt buying big expensive equipment. You don't need big expensive equipment to get started with digital art in the modern era. I mean, pros are going to be using expensive equipment, but when you're just getting started, don't make it something that you feel awful about. Conversely though, if you're the type of personality that needs that guilt, then yeah, go out and buy something expensive that makes sure that you feel guilty so that you have to go and sit down and draw. Anything that keeps you sitting down and drawing on this thing, because the more time you spend with these tools, the more comfortable you get with it. If you're good to go and the computer's fast enough and you're set up, then yeah, absolutely, I recommend Sketchbook Pro. There are other options as well, including something like Clip Studio Paint, which also has a flat fee. Sometimes it's on sale, so it's pretty cheap. But something like Photoshop, you don't need that if you're a beginner, okay? Because Photoshop is really designed for like advanced stuff. It's sort of like, buying, $300, $500 sports equipment is only necessary if you're in the pros. You don't really need that if you're just learning, okay? Just going into training in your very first weeks or months or years of learning. So Sketchbook Pro is a great starting point. It'll do you right, trust me on that. It's a one-time download fee and you get all the updates from then on. And man, it is streamlined. It is very simple to use and it's not cluttered with tons of hidden menus and things like that, but you can do an awful lot with it. Eventually, you can even get to the point where you're creating custom brushes. And I've done loads and loads of tutorials. So if you're just like, yo, I want to learn from Trent. That Trent guy, he seems pretty cool. I like his tutorials. I even have a absolute beginner's guide to Sketchbook Pro here on my YouTube channel that you can get started with. And that'll just get you up and running so you can start learning the basics of layer management and how to change out your brushes and how to import new brushes and how to make selections so that you don't draw outside of the lines. Next up, I want to talk to you about pen tablets. Man, there's a lot of options out there. But you don't need a lot of options. You just got to answer 3 questions. 1, what's your budget? If it's low, like really low, start with the Deco series, made by a company called XP Pen. And yes, I do have a review of this particular tablet here on my YouTube channel. The Deco series is a tablet that you set off to the side of your computer and you can draw on this tablet and then it moves the cursor on the screen. You'll have pressure sensitivity and it's a pretty good range. I actually use it for some of my professional level stuff, even though some people won't believe that because they think you got to draw on the screen. And if you do have to draw on the screen, I'm going to recommend that you check out the Artist 12 series. And you can check the links in my text below this video because I have videos reviewing and going through all the features of both of those. And that's basically going to be a affordable range for something that you can draw on the screen. You do still have to plug that into a computer because it's not a standalone tablet device. That's, again, going back to what I was saying about the iPad. That's very mobile. This is like you're sitting at a desk. You still have to kind of sit at a desk or on your couch, but you got to have it hooked up to a computer. But I'm going to tell you, man, you don't need to go out and spend $3,000 on a big expensive 30-inch Wacom. You know, Wacom does have some cheap tablet options if you're really attached to the idea of working with Wacom, but they are generally one of the more expensive brands. I think XP Pen has a very competitive product, and I've reviewed all of these, by the way, all these other brands. And probably the 2 biggest competitors right now for your dollar are Wacom and XP Pen. And I found that XP Pen tends to come in at a slightly cheaper cost without really much of a difference in terms of the quality. These are just basically the two big armies duking it out for your buck. Both of them offer something that you can draw off to the side of the screen with, you know, like basically a beginner tablet that's like $100. And I think that's a great place to start for a beginner. You know, but when you want to go and draw on the screen, XP Pen has got probably the edge in terms of a cheap option that you can actually draw on the screen with. And that is, yeah, again, the Artist 12 series. XP Pen is a really good brand. There's also Huion is probably my number 3 choice for tablets. And just keep in mind that when you're buying these like kind of beginner tablets, if you're paying less than $100, you're getting pretty cheap equipment here. You're getting pretty cheap tools in terms of the range of where things go. You know, it is advanced technology. And from comments that I've seen, there's a lot of complaints about some of these cheaper models of tablets. So if you buy some no-name brand, it might break after less than a year. Although, you know, there may be comments below, and hopefully if you've had experiences with any of these tablets, maybe help by leaving a comment to let people know what your experience was like working with those tablets. That would really help people out. Another option to consider is maybe looking into the Microsoft Surface Pro 8. I've heard that they've made improvements to the pen, but I personally have never tried it. I don't know much about it. It seems compelling because it's about the same price as like a high-powered iPad Pro, and it comes with a pen. And I suppose the advantage of getting something like this is like you get your full Windows accessibility. So Windows-based programs, all of them will run on this. All right, rock and roll. Now you're set up, okay? You've got an idea of like what the basic beginner tools are, but I want to help you out with a little bit more of the mindset to ensure that you've got a bit of success with this, to make sure you don't quit. Now I've been thinking a lot about you guys. I think about, you know, what would be the barriers to entry. I see a lot of the comments, what gets people frustrated. So these things are going to help you to stay on the path, okay? First thing, we talked a little bit about this, but you got to keep those costs low, man. So like if you're just learning guitar, you don't go out and buy a $5,000 guitar, even if you're rich. Like that would be silly, right? You know, you buy yourself like a cheapy $100 guitar, you strum away, you learn those lessons, you get your chords down, you figure out whether you even love it and whether you can commit to it before you go and put a pile of money into it. Unless, of course, If your personality type is the type that feels guilty if you spent a lot of money and then you're obligated, if you feel like you have a lot of sense of obligation, yeah, sure, go out and spend expensive, spend money on expensive equipment. That'll force you to stick with it. But otherwise, probably don't want to recommend that you go out and blow a pile of money. You don't need expensive equipment to do great digital art. I've proven that here on my channel. Second thing, make a comfortable workspace, okay? Yeah, you could just borrow your parents' iPad or your brother's iPad or something, but the problem is then every time you want to sketch on it, you got to ask a favor. And it's like, that's not really convenient for you to actually practice. You need a comfortable workspace. Maybe it's a little desk in your room, but set aside a location, a place where you can not be too distracted, where you can actually commit a little bit of time every day. Because yes, you're also going to need to commit at least 1 hour a day. Now, maybe you only have a half an hour, doesn't matter. Some kind of regimented every day I work on this kind of a thing, okay? And what do you practice? Well, firstly, try to make it familiar, make the digital similar to the traditional. So if you're used to drawing with pencils, for example, which a lot of us learn to draw with pencils on our notepads or whatever, our binders. And maybe you just need to find a pencil tool in the digital program that feels and acts similarly to what you're used to from working with the traditional mediums. If you're a little bit more advanced and you're just switching over to digital, like maybe you do oil paints, we'll find a great oil painting brush within, Sketchbook Pro or whatever program it is that you've chosen. But find something that's familiar so that you can anticipate how it's going to react a little bit. And you can kind of go, oh, okay, so now I don't have to worry about how the brushes are going to react. Now it's just about understanding how these layers work and how to get a little bit more color changes and how do I mix colors and all the fun stuff that's just part of the exploration of spending time with the program, okay? The last thing I'm gonna say is that you should do at least one new tutorial every week. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean like big workshops. I do a lot of advanced workshops, but I also do a lot of beginner workshops that just teach you fundamentals of drawing. Things like working on lighting, like how do you light an object in a hard light situation? How do you shade the surface of an object? How do you create a sense of texture and turning of forms in objects, okay? So every week, sit down and focus on one new thing and let that be your focus for that week. You could even build your own curriculum around this and go like, oh, okay, so this week I'm just working on lighting spheres, okay? And then all that knowledge is gonna carry over to the next week. So the next week when you're working on designing little buildings or gas stations, and I have free challenges, art challenges here on my YouTube channel. These are the artist workout series, and you'll learn to draw guns and you'll learn to draw gas stations and buildings and structures in 2D perspective or 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, etc. And each one of these little beginner lessons is going to compound. Don't get obsessed with looking at high-level masterworks if you're a beginner. Don't do it. You'll compare yourself. You can pull a little bit of information from it and maybe even trace or try to copy a part of it. But like the problem is that a lot of times people will just get frustrated because they can't make their thing look like this master who's been doing it for 30 years. It's not about talent. It's about time. They just spent more time doing it. And the last thing I want to say is to remember, most importantly, have fun with the whole process. So many beginners put so much pressure on themselves. They're looking at all these amazing artists all around them and they're like, I can't do that, so I guess I should just quit. Nah, dude, that's a good target to learn from. Look at what they're doing and go, oh, well, maybe I can learn this little part of what they're doing, or keep dissecting it. If there's that artist you keep coming back to, your brain will be working overtime when you're not working on it. And it'll try to figure out how they did what they did. So don't let yourself lose the fun. That's going to be the most important thing. And that's why I created those easy art lessons, by the way, which are guided tutorials. They're meant to be fun. This week, you're going to be drawing a treasure chest. This week, you're going to be drawing a barrel. This week, you're going to be drawing character faces. And it guides you through in real time new information that's going to help you to build upon. So later, all of your digital art skills, when you're doing masterful paintings, you'll look back on those years and go, wow, yes, it was a good thing I had some kind of training wheels. So anyway, that's it for me on this week's video. I really hope that you have the absolute most success with your digital art endeavor. I would love to hear from you in a couple of years when you've mastered all this stuff. So please do drop a comment below if this helped you. And dudes, that's it for me today. I usually do videos on Fridays, so I'll see you in the next one. All right, ciao.